You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by Amac, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your Amac podcast, Better for America. Today, folks, we will be hearing from Ben Weingarten. Ben is a good friend of mine, a friend of Amac's, and he's a journalist. He has contributed to so many media outlets, including The Federalist and Newsweek. Ben Weingarten is also the host of the Weingarten Report, and that is aired weekly here at Amac. So I'm going to encourage folks to hear more from Ben Weingarten. Check out his great videos on our website. Now, today we're going to talk about critical race theory and its effects in the K through 12 schools. Folks, we're going to talk about what it is so that you are armed with the knowledge and the truth to speak to your friends and family, to speak with your school boards, your teachers. What is critical race theory exactly? Well, let me tell you what it is. It really is an anti-individual, anti-American, and a fear-focused rebranding of Marxism, and it's now in schools. For those who stand opposed to CRT, we are branded racists. So if you are against critical race theory, you are branded a racist. And what's happening, folks, is school boards are afraid of being called a racist. And so what they're doing is they're buckling. But parents, grandparents, and all of our listeners, even students, are fighting back. States like Arkansas, Florida, and Texas, they have already approved bans on forcing teachers to give lessons on critical race theory. And a recent Amac poll, and tens of thousands of you responded to our Amac poll, which can be found on our website. If you look at the poll archives, I think we had it up on our website a week ago. Overwhelmingly, you told us, those who completed the poll told us that critical race theory is at the top of your list as it relates to the areas that you'd like for both Amac to focus on, and also it's of great concern to you. It's a national crisis, really. Finally, folks, America is standing up. We're seeing that critical race theory is being banned in many, many states. But America is still under fire. And the reason for that is the core idea and the core teachings behind critical race theory is not equal opportunity as you and I understand it, right? We understand equal opportunity as the equal opportunity to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what critical race theory does is it actually guts Martin Luther King's dream when he said in his famous speech, that he dreams of a day when his children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And critical race theory, it despises individualism, and it goes against this very teaching that we should be judged by the content of our character, not by the color of our skin. You see, the goal of critical race theory is to delegitimize America. Literally, flip the tables on our institutions that protect individual liberty, equal opportunity, upward mobility, and freedom itself. And in place of those constitutional values, critical race theory aims to reduce us to simply black and white. It really does. It requires that we focus on the color of the pigment of our skin. This incites race warfare. It concentrates power. They want to redistribute wealth, and they want to fundamentally remake America. When I speak with Ben Weingarten, I'm going to ask him some questions, some real questions, like what does critical race theory look like in the classroom? And why exactly is it dangerous for America's youth? Let me share with you, though, some 7 very hard truths and facts regarding critical race theory. First, America is about individual equality, not group equity. The idea behind critical race theory is that America is just groups, and the groups are defined by skin color. They do not see America as individuals with separate souls, goals, dreams, skills, hopes, and God-given attributes. Of course, the critical race theory premise is false because we are born to think and live and dream and awake each day as individuals, not as a group. The nation might be divided by a million ways. Think about it. We're divided by age, by gender, by height and weight, by hair color, eye color, your accent, your attitude, your education. The list goes on, your income, your geography, your health, and yes, race. But we are still all individuals. As a self-governing people, we have a constitution that recognizes our individuality, which gives us the same rights under law. So our differences give us separate paths to success, and those differences are defined by our free will. The government's job is to get out of the way, not bulldoze us level. With foresight, our Constitution is also self-correcting. Consider this. While the first 10 amendments came with the articles, other amendments, such as the 13th Amendment ending slavery, the 14th Amendment, which applies equal protection for individuals, and the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote, those amendments came later. In other words, America, our Constitution, is self-correcting. And so I believe that what critical race theory is, it's teaching Americans a lie. And what is one of the first lies? Well, whether you're black or white, brown, tan, amber, olive, whatever color you are, we have individual rights, not group equity rights in our Constitution. Critical race theory points to group equity, not your individual rights. Second, equal opportunity is not an equal outcome. I think most of you listening can recall your parents or your grandparents talking about hard work and the reward for hard work. So if two people have the same opportunity to work at the same job, we are not guaranteed an equal outcome if one individual works harder, works longer, works smarter. The Constitution, our American Constitution, gives all Americans an equal shot. And if we fail perfection, the goal is to keep trying. An equal shot at education, employment, property ownership, etc. The goal is equal protection, the right to rise or fall, succeed or fail, and try again, all equal under the law. But folks, this is the opposite of what CRT guarantees. CRT's guaranteed outcome means they must concentrate power to equalize outcomes, regardless of who earned what. Let me say that again. CRT, critical race theory, is concentrating power to equalize outcomes, regardless of who earned what. So returns on your hard work and trust in the individual are essentially gone. Third lie about CRT is critical race theory itself is racist, and it's telling you that it's not. It's actually saying if you don't adopt the principles of critical race theory that you are a racist, when in fact, critical race theory is itself racist. Let me explain what I mean. Critical race theory not only assigns all life grievances by one race to another, it suggests that Black and white citizens with equal education, with equal employment, ideas and industry and effort cannot attain similar outcomes. Again, critical race theory suggests that Black and white citizens with all things equal, meaning equal education, equal employment, same ideas, equal industry, and equal effort will not attain a similar outcome. Why? Because the principles of merit-based achievement are rejected in favor of reverse racism. Because it's easier, folks, I guess, to hate and to blame than to love and support. Critical race theory defines the possible as the impossible, and then it blames it on race. So things that are possible, it will say it is impossible because of the color of your skin. Folks, for people who are embracing critical race theory, race is really all that matters, and they're pitting one race against the other. And this sort of teaching, in my opinion, is the opposite, that we are all equal in God's eyes, and that we're equal under the laws of right here in America and in our Constitution. It just really, really gets me upset. I don't think I've ever heard anything more pathetic than teaching children to resent and to blame and to feel hopeless. Another thing that CRT does is it literally denies the upward mobility of individuals because it denies the idea that hard work and equal protection succeed. Upward mobility is the gaping hole in Marxism's bucket. Okay. And what we need to understand is that if you believe your skin color defines your ability to succeed, then you're buying into the lie. Folks, I have many, many Black friends. I know many successful folks of all color, and each and every one of them, regardless of their skin color, have explained to me that the reason for their success was because of their hard work and their effort, because of their individuality, their drive, and their belief in themselves. Another very sad part about critical race theory is it truly immorally pushes intergenerational guilt. It is a fraud because the only way to justify putting one race down for another is they teach resentment. And they do that by pinning the past on the present, intentional infliction of intergenerational guilt, making successors responsible for ancestors. And I think that that is fundamentally immoral. We here at Amac are going to be working very hard to bring you the truth. On our website, if you check us out at amac.us, you'll find a ton of information that explains critical race theory, what it is, and what you can do. We're working right now behind the scenes. Our folks are out there. They're working a way to provide an easy way for you to get involved, for you to contact the people who matter so that we can stop critical race theory. Folks, don't go anywhere. I have Ben Weingarten coming up next with us. Thank you for listening in and tuning in to Amac's podcast, Better for America. And please like and share the podcast so that more people are aware that Amac is the fastest growing conservative organization in America. We'll be right back. Folks, with us today is Ben Weingarten. He is a journalist for many newsworthy organizations, a senior contributor at The Federalist, a columnist at Newsweek. He's contributed to outlets which include American Greatness, Breitbart, City Journal, Conservative Review. The list goes on. The Hill, National Review, Newsmax, New York Post, Real Clear Politics, and so many others. Ben's work has been highlighted at The Ben Shapiro Show, Conservative HQ, The Daily Caller, The Federalist Radio Hour, and Fox News Channel's Fox at Night, The Lars Larson Show, and many more. But I think what I'm most excited about is that Ben is the host of the Weingarten Report. So for anybody listening, if you go to the AMAC website, you're going to find Ben Weingarten's videos right there on our site. They are really fabulous, so we want you to check him out. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the kind introduction and really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. Just so people know a little bit more about you, Ben, you were born in the great state of New York. You were raised in New Jersey. You studied at Columbia University. And I know that your love for liberty was formed really when you engaged with a lot of folks that had opposing views. Which is kind of cool. And of course, me being a New Yorker, I do often find myself being the minority in a discussion among peers. So it's just really wonderful to have you with us. And I love hearing your perspective. I want to talk to you, Ben, about the incredible changes that we're seeing in our country over the last handful of months. Like, we're witnessing the rising cost of goods is one example. We see the influx of illegals that are crossing our border, the humanitarian crisis that is causing. We know that crime is soaring across America, and we see that the Biden administration has really created crisis after crisis. Our listeners know it. And now we see this introduction of a new kind of teaching in our K through 12 school districts, critical race theory. Now, I know, Ben, you and I have chatted. I know you're very passionate about this topic. So I want to jump right into it because when we conducted a poll on our website, AMAC members overwhelmingly reminded us that this critical race theory was the most important issue, largely, that they wanted us to focus on because they understand the danger that this presents to America's youth. I'd love for you to share with me and to our listeners so that they can understand what the heck really is it and why is it so dangerous? I'm going to turn that question right over to you.
Yeah, well, first, I think Amac members are dead on to prioritize the issue of critical race theory, and it's pervading schools across the country, and not just schools, but really all of our most vital institutions, from the national security and intelligence apparatus to law enforcement to corporate boardrooms. Obviously, pop culture, every aspect of our society at the top levels is being dominated by this woke movement. And critical race theory is the education angle within schools, but it pervades all of our institutions because we're in the midst of what I would call an anti-cultural revolution in this country. And it was sparked starting last summer. But of course, this has its roots decades back. And this is just the latest manifestation of really cultural Marxism. And for what I would describe critical race theory in a word as racial Marxism, which is very powerful because if you create a facade or a veneer that legitimizes radically leftist policies across the board in being racially sensitive or being anti-racist, it creates the appearance of it being virtuous and moral and good to be on the side of the critical race theorists and those who adhere to kind of the woke tenets or the woke dogma more broadly. But really what it boils down to is dividing society into the oppressors and the oppressed, as Marxists have always done, except it's really minorities and whites, and white males being the pinnacle of evil, essentially, in this pyramid of privilege that they use to pit Americans against each other, to suggest that we are a systemically racist country rather than a country which has been the greatest beacon of liberty and justice for people of all colors of any nation in the history of mankind. And where it's failed to achieve that, continues to strive to get closer and closer to it. But to the critical race theorists, every single inequity, and they mean outcome that's different between different groups of people as they define them, can only be attributed to one thing, and that's racism and bigotry. And consequently, the critical race theorists and those who talk about equity instead of equality, a huge buzzword today, they believe that they need to equalize outcomes by doing all sorts of things that would completely erode liberty and justice in this country. It's beyond wealth redistribution. It's to basically playing God and socially re-engineering society so that all the outcomes come out the way that essentially leftists want them to come out. And in the process, they will destroy this greatest experiment in liberty and justice in the history of mankind. They will pit us and divide us against each other. And they want America to tear itself apart, essentially, so that it's basically a divide and conquer strategy, so that they can usurp more and more power. And so that's why this is really a dangerous time. It's a moment where Americans have to be courageous and speak up, understand the size, scope, and nature of the problem, and not be cowed into submission by being called racist for opposing critical race theory. No, you oppose critical race theory because you believe in treating everyone as an individual based on the content of their character, rather than determining everything on the basis of color of skin. And if you look at the rhetoric, essentially the rhetoric of the critical race theorists is the same bigoted and racist rhetoric that existed in the 1800s and the 1700s in this country. It's just spun as being virtuous, moral, and good. And we have to oppose it at every single turn. And of course, the fact that they're trying to indoctrinate children into this fundamentally anti-American message is why I think so many people are so woke to the wokes.
That's right. Good point. And also, folks have got to recognize that critical race theory ignores data. It ignores the truth. There is no country in the world that attracts more minorities than America. We're like a magnet, and we have the largest immigrant population in the world, 40 million Americans born elsewhere, most minorities, many African American. And we know that I believe it's roughly 25% of America's millionaires are made up of Black, Hispanic, or Asian Americans, I think that proves that the American dream is attainable by all people. But what they want to do, as you've said it, is they want to divide and conquer. So there's a real intentional effort to set things up this way. In other words, the folks that are doing this, a very elite group of people that are really behind pushing critical race theory, know exactly what they're doing. They're doing it by design. And if people have got to understand that CRT is Marxism, it pushes resentment, it pushes blame, it pushes guilt and fear, and it does it in our K through 12 systems. So, one of the things, Ben, that I want to ask you is some people I was speaking with kind of that aren't all that privy to the details, what CRT is, don't have children in school, sort of just, have the blinders on, so to speak, as it relates to critical race theory. And they said, oh, come on, give me examples. What do you mean? How is this bad? Isn't it important, Ben, that our 7-year-olds know about slavery in America and how wrong it was? Isn't it important that they know what segregation was? Isn't critical race theory really a good thing that we're teaching people history? And this is what some parents that are unaware and others believe. So I want to ask you, in your opinion, how damaging is it for young children who are in a classroom setting with teachers that are being forced to teach critical race theory? What does that sound like to a 7-year-old? What's happening?
Yeah, well, in some cases, teachers themselves, of course, who believe in this ideology, and over a large minority of teachers, it seems, according to some polling, not parents, but teachers believe in this ideology. And what are the stakes of it? Well, if you teach children that their country is an evil, irredeemable, deplorable bastion of racism and bigotry, then why would you love this country? Why would you defend this country? Why would you ultimately want to contribute to the system that we've all enjoyed the fruits of in our lives? You would want to destroy that system. And because that would be the moral, just, good, virtuous thing to do, to tear down this oppressive, racist, imperialist kind of system. And I'm using the same kind of rhetoric that you would have heard those in the Soviet Union use in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s about America. And that's no mistake, by the way, that it's the exact same rhetoric, just with a 21st century spin to make it palatable to a much wider audience. Look, it's an ideology and ethos of national self-loathing, national hatred. And if you hate your country, you're obviously not going to try to make it better. You're not going to stand up to defend it. You're going to try to overturn all of these institutions. And like I said earlier, that means you're going to turn against liberty and justice, which ensures that every individual has the best possible chance to pursue their dreams, their hopes, their goals, their aspirations, regardless of their skin color. And instead, this makes everything about skin color. But again, it's really a cynical power play at the end of the day. And it's always imperative to keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean, one can only imagine the damage that's done if you indoctrinate kids in anti-American rhetoric day in, day out for hours at a time. And this dodge that many on the left and many in the media have raised, that if you're against critical race theory, it's because you don't want teachers to teach people about slavery. I don't know anyone in the last 30 years who's been in school who has not learned about slavery and segregation and all of the other ills that have occurred in American history. And they have to be put in the proper context of, this was America not living up to its core values and principles, but the documents themselves and the values and principles that were enshrined in those documents would never tolerate those sorts of policies. And we purged those ills, those evils from our system. And we had to fight bloody war to do so, and plenty of other bloody periods in our history as well. All of that absolutely needs to be taught in American history, but that's not the only part of American history. And if you repudiate those values and principles which reject those evils, you're going to set us up for future evils going forward. So it's a total dodge to say you're against CRT because you don't want people to know the ugly facts about American history. That's simply a fallacy, a straw man argument, and it shows that they don't really want to defend CRT on the merits.
Yeah. I read an article in the Washington Examiner, and this was a school, Shipley School in Pennsylvania. It's actually a primary school. I think you spend $40,000 a year in tuition. Um, at this school, the article said that parents were asked to decenter whiteness at home and in their family. Decenter. And they said, quote, pay attention to how your language may perpetuate universal standards of beauty, speech, behavior, dress, conflict, and resolution. And a memo from the middle school teacher read, and this is important that people know that this is real, this is happening out there. It said, it's quite common for a person to compliment two of my three children on their beautiful blue eyes. And while I always appreciate their compliment, I am conscious of my third brown-eyed child. What message is she receiving about how she fits in with European standards of beauty? And I'm thinking to myself, the sad truth is that people are still, see, and to me, Ben, that statement right there for someone to be thinking that way, that because one person has commented on the beautiful color of their eyes, it just automatically, inherently means that the other person has ugly eyes or is not as beautiful, is so ridiculous. Geez, that is truly, how do you live a life without watching every word that you say? To compliment someone on eye color. So they've taken this to a whole new level. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, and there's plenty of rhetoric out there, and beyond rhetoric, so-called scholarly writings talking about the fact that merit is a white, Anglo-Saxon, European kind of trait. Well, gosh, if that means that merit is an inherently evil thing, then we're going to prioritize everything but merit in society. And think about what that will ultimately lead to. That will lead to a society of politics dominating everything and ultimately of failure. It's a simple standard. If you're an engineer and you build a bridge, the bridge it either stands or it falls. If you're a society and you're not building on the basis of merit, your society is going to crumble.
It will.
Merit, achievement, excellence, those are all things that have to be celebrated if we're going to be a thriving society. If they're not, and we say that merit, achievement, or excellence are inherently negative traits, characteristics, things that we want to strive for, and that we're going to prioritize everything but those things, we can't exist as a society. We certainly can't succeed. And this isn't even to say anything about all of the adversaries out there who will be cheering us on as we self-immolate and we reject the core principles on which we've built this society. And again, those core principles which have no skin color associated with them. I mean, That's the important thing about prioritizing what every individual brings to the table and rewarding people for their individual skills, abilities, achievements, which our system allows people to flourish most by what they bring to the table, as opposed to these immutable characteristics that by definition, you have no control over whatsoever. It's in the tyrannical societies where who succeeds and who fails is determined by everything but merit. It's by who your family is, or who wins in a bloody war, or what your religion is, or who your forefathers were generations in the past. Our system explicitly rejects that at its best, and it doesn't mean it always lives up to it, but it's certainly done so to a greater degree than any other nation in the history of mankind. And so those who trash the country with these sorts of theories are not only out of their minds, but the only reason that they have the time or the resources to come up with these insane theories is because of all the bountiful greatness that we've developed in this country. Only a country that has been as successful and wealthy and prosperous and happy as ours could create the kinds of people who spend their times at universities coming up with these theories aimed at undermining the country and destroying it ultimately.
Yeah. The good news is that so many people are recognizing the dangers of this critical race theory. Governor Greg Abbott's, his signature made Texas one of a handful of states that have passed the legislation. In 2020, former President Donald Trump, he put a ban on federal employees from training that discusses critical race theory or white privilege. He called it propaganda. And we see Ron DeSantis, he is leading the charge to ban critical race theory in schools in Florida. And so that's the good news. Our members are engaged, and those that are listening, I know, are with us on this issue. How can American citizens, though, help make changes to better the education system? What might be your advice to anybody listening if they know that critical race theory is there in their school systems? Any advice?
Well, first of all, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And so there are investigative journalists, reporters out there who would love to collect any and all documents that parents have, videos, obviously, that parents have, of what is actually being taught in the classes, what the teachers are arguing, what the administrators are arguing, and beyond. And the more that gets exposed, the more the pro CRT side will be on the defensive, and ultimately they will cave, although they will continue to fight. Nevertheless, they hate truth, and that's why they have to because it exposes the evil of this ideology. And that's precisely why you're seeing, of course, this dodge of, oh, we're not really imposing critical race theory. And then it's a shift to, oh, yes, we're imposing critical race theory, but it's not what you say it is. And then it's, oh, yeah, we are imposing critical race theory, and it is what you say it is, but you're a bigot if you're against it. And that's essentially the way that this has gone. And that follows a lot of patterns of the left. But so the first thing is transparency, open up the books, expose this to sunlight. And then another part is there has to be an effort to expose the funding, the public funding associated with this. So there ought to be FOIA requests, a Freedom of Information Act requests put out across every state. What public dollars are going towards an equity agenda of any kind? So we need to understand that the dollars behind it, what the substance of it is, and then we can come up with legislative policies and cultural pressure to ultimately see it defeated. And the left does this all the time. So we ought to look at the way that they operate to determine how we would. A standard that I would raise for our politicians, and this goes to, and politicians need pressure, of course, from their constituents to move, is what would Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer be doing if they were in your shoes and they wanted to achieve what you wanted to achieve? We should hold all of our leaders to that exact same standard, because you're going to lose every time if the other side is willing to do anything and everything to achieve their ends. We ought to do the same thing consistent with our own values and principles. So a couple things, again, transparency in terms of exposing what this actually looks like in terms of how it manifests itself in school, and then the dollars behind it and who the administrators are as well, who are pushing it. And then you can come up with legislative pushes and also the cultural pressure to end up tamping this down. But that said, it's going to go beyond schools. It really is in every aspect of our society.
It is so
and
deep.
So,
yeah.
The overarching point that I would make is courageous people must speak openly, honestly, and with candor about the fact that this agenda is not a virtuous agenda, not a moral agenda, not about actual justice, but it's about grievances. It's about pitting us against each other. For some, it's cynical because they think that they can just feed the woke crocodile, and ultimately the woke crocodile won't eat them, but it always does. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, we can't cower in submission in the face of this onslaught in every aspect of our society. We have to reject it, and we have to do so in a calm and sober and measured and not emotional fashion, because otherwise you lose the country if the country rejects all of the core values and principles on which it is based. And if we tear at our own fabric, then no adversary will ever have to defeat us. We'll have defeated ourselves.
That's right. The tough part too, is you just laid out, it is everywhere. So we've got to be brave. We've got to stand up. We've got to be shed a lot of light on this issue. It saddens me that we have a current president who seems to cleave to the ideas of critical race theory. And, we saw that Donald Trump, he was someone who called things what they were. He called them out, and so it's going to be tough. Why do you think, the Biden administration and those people, Kamala Harris, for example, as well, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, why aren't they speaking up about this, in your opinion? What do you think?
Yeah, and of course, if you look at speeches that Joe Biden gave 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, they would suggest that he suddenly flipped on all manner of issues and now to your point, he says we're a systemically racist country. He said that repeatedly. He's put forth several executive orders overriding the Trump administration's effort to purge CRT from the federal government. He's imposing an equity agenda, so-called, which flies in the face of equality of opportunity, goes towards equality of outcomes, which is part of this whole anti-racist woke agenda. So why are they all embracing it? The simple answer, in my view, and I wrote a book about this, American Ingrates, Ilhan Omar and the progressive Islamist takeover of the Democratic Party, is that the progressives are ascendant in the party. That's where all the energy is. And a simple measure that it's obvious to everyone now, it's readily apparent that Joe Biden's overseeing arguably the most radically leftist administration in American history. And this is a guy who was, one of the members in good standing of the Democrat establishment for decades. This is not someone who is an ideologue or a radical, certainly by nature. And that's one of the reasons I think that he was the front man that the Democrats chose to try to push across the finish line in 2020, because they knew that an overt radical would turn off easily half the country, probably. But if by a simple measure, I'd urge everyone, check out the Congressional Progressive Caucus membership. There's, I believe, well over 100 members now. When that started, there were 3 members. So that's almost 100 members of a House majority. That's obviously a bit over 200. But you're talking 40, almost 50% of members of the House, the Democrat majority there, who identify as progressives. When the Congressional Progressive Caucus started, I believe there were 3 members. And that was in early 1990s. That's a dramatic explosion in progressive dominance in the Democrat Party. And it's really driven by the elites in the Democrat Party. So even though the elites in the Democrat Party are not a majority by any stretch, they're the powerful segments of society in the media, in academia, in various other fields, as prominent fields as well. And they also are money for the party as well. So you look at where the elites are in the party, you look at, obviously, it's reflected in the representation in the party. And then obviously the next generation, people in schools, younger people, always tend to be more radically leftist. And you have a recipe for disaster in terms of embracing that radical progressive agenda. So people in the Democrat establishment, like, for example, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her victory in a primary over a longtime member of the Democrat establishment, with serious seniority in the party, that was a warning sign to all the folks in the establishment, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and others. You better get on board with the progressive agenda, or you could be next. You could be primaried next. And that demonstrates that there's a real fear of the power of progressives in the party. That's why the progressives are being embraced. And hopefully it's going to end up hurting the Democrats politically in the midterms and then in 2024 as well. And by the way, the Republican victories across the board in many House districts that were looked at as toss-up districts in 2020 also demonstrated that Americans see the radicalism for what it is. But nevertheless, as you note, that the people at the top of the party have embraced this agenda is very dangerous for the country. And a lot of damage can be done with just a president in power who believes in these ideas and is willing to impose them on the country. So long story short, it's the direction of the party. It's where the energy is in the party. It's where the money and the intellectual focus is in the party. And that's why it's gone progressive, and the power.
And the power, boy. Well, we're encouraging people, do your homework, go onto our website, check out more, learn more about critical race theory and what you can do. But no matter what, do not buy it. Because Americans, I think we cleave to our values, not to skin color. And critical race theory, plain and simple, it's junk. It's a disgrace. Ben Weingarten, this has been wonderful to have you on our podcast today. Can you share with people how to get to more of you on your social media sites?
Well, I appreciate that. Well, in addition to the Weingarten Report videos, which you can find on the Amac site and then also on the YouTube channel as well, there's a playlist set up for it. You can follow all of my work at weingarten.substack.com. So as noted, I write for The Federalist, Newsweek, Epoch Times, several other publications. I'm on a whole host of shows. I'm a Newsmax contributor. I do a show, NatCon Squad, which is a weekly national conservatism focused show. I also do a media criticism show for The Federalist called Bad News. all of those links and writings, as well as the Weingarten Report videos, go up via my email list at weingarten.substack.com. And then I'm probably too active on Twitter, but you can follow me there at BHWeingarten as well.
Fabulous. We've got that up on the screen, folks, and you can check out more information in our bio. Don't forget to like and share this podcast. And folks, if you have not downloaded the Amac News app, you can watch and listen to this podcast and all podcasts on the go, wherever you are. Just simply download the Amac News app, and you'll gain access to our great articles, including the Weingarten Report. Ben, what a real pleasure to have you with us. This was great. I look forward to having you back with us again soon, I do hope. And to all of you listening out there today, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to having you back with us again next time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.